Alright guys, so in this video, I'm going to be discussing Big Ten's potential next move. When it comes to conference realignment, all is very quiet on realignment. Not many rumors out there right now. It's not surprising. We normally get a big uptrend in terms of the amount of news related to conference realignment in the summer, specifically late June, early July. That's when it seems to go down. But the Big Ten will certainly be in the news for maybe just rumors or possibly adding ACC teams, evaluating the Big Ten's next targets for conference expansion. Then I'm also going to look at what are the actual attractiveness scores of all the major teams in college football and who could be the best value for one of these conferences, whether it is the SEC or the Big Ten. That's where we're expecting the big-time ACC teams to disperse to. I think the bigger question on top of that, will the ACC be able to remain together with the additions of SMU, Cal, and Stanford? Will that stabilize the conference enough to at least save it from implosion? Unlike the Pac-12, we all know the Pac-12 should have been more proactive. They should have added teams when the Big 12 lost both Texas and Oklahoma and was vulnerable. The Pac-12 did nothing. It ended up costing them their entire existence. But when it comes to the top teams available right now, or potentially available, I should say, for the Big Ten, you do have Notre Dame. So the dialogue on Notre Dame really revolves around the playoff structure. A lot of people, a month ago or 2 months ago, whenever it came out that Notre Dame had 0% chance of getting a bye in the first round, a lot of people were surprised that Notre Dame would be okay with that. But you do have to understand they very likely, if they are the 5 seed, they would face a group of 5 team at home in the first round. I'm not saying it's as good as a bye, but it's close. So Notre Dame, it'll be interesting. I think we're going to get a big restructuring in college football anyways, but the idea that Notre Dame can't receive a bye in the first round, it just seems silly, and it seems like a, let's just say, temporary thing. I don't know if Notre Dame actually will join the Big Ten. I have really stopped talking about it because I'm just tired of talking about Notre Dame. They want their name in the news. They want to be the most wanted person. We know they are the #1 free agent right now in college football, but at a certain point it just gets tired. If you want to be an independent, that's fine. We're not going to give you all the attention. So Notre Dame, they can be an independent. The Big Ten will be fine without them, but obviously adding Notre Dame would be extremely great for the conference, and it would definitely catapult them clearly above the SEC, but it depends on what the SEC does with some of these ACC teams. You also do have Florida State. Now, another thing that's important to note, how big are these conferences actually going to get? Because I could understand the Big Ten completing their West Wing. I was one that said it was going to happen because the travel was so absurd. They needed to add more teams from the West Coast to help with that. But now we're just getting the Big Ten going to go to 22, 24 teams. It's just out of control. So Florida State, I've always said, I think Florida State's going to the SEC. I think they fit the SEC better. You look at the footprint. I can understand the Big Ten wanting them because they have no teams in Florida. That's why I've thought if they don't get FSU, maybe they'll shift and go towards a team like Miami. But FSU obviously is going to be wanted by the Big Ten. So is Clemson. I maintain the opinion. I think FSU and Clemson are going to the SEC. It just sets up too well for the SEC in terms of keeping their footprint the same to take both of those teams. But we will see. It's all based around money. You also do have North Carolina. So this is where it kind of gets interesting with the Big Ten. It just depends on who the Big Ten wants to take, how much do academics play into it, and would the Big Ten, because they take a North Carolina, have to also take Duke? Because that would make the conference amazing in terms of basketball. You would be adding 2 clear college basketball blue bloods, the greatest rivalry in college basketball. And you would not only have the greatest rivalry in college basketball, but you've also got the greatest rivalry in college football with Ohio State and Michigan. And Duke, UNC, and basketball. That's very attractive for the Big Ten. Not to mention North Carolina and Duke, they've been more competitive in football. So I could see a scenario where the Big Ten does add both North Carolina and Duke. Their academics are definitely up to standard. It would be more of a basketball decision, but it's not like their football teams are 3-9 every year. They're at least competitive. North Carolina with Drake May, they had Sam Howell. Duke's had a few decent years recently. I know Riley Leonard transferred, but still they're at least like a 6-6, 7-5 team, possibly if they go to the Big Ten. So I think North Carolina and Duke are very interesting. Let's say, for example, Clemson and FSU do go to the SEC. The Big Ten would have to decide, are they really obsessed with getting a team in the state of Florida? Then they would go for Miami and maybe UNC, but then you would be splitting up Duke and UNC. That would be a big issue. That's almost like a non-starter. Would you take all three of them if you really want a team in the state of Florida? It'll be interesting to watch. There also is Miami they list. Certainly Miami is a team I'm sure the Big Ten would at least look at. And then the other teams I'm not going to really talk about. Stanford is on this list. Stanford is very polarizing. Their football program has not been good, but their location, their academics are both amazing. Kansas is on this list. I don't see Kansas going to the Big Ten. I do remember back in 2021 when the first big realignment news broke of Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, Kansas was listed time and time again to the Big Ten because of their great basketball program. And now Kansas getting the renovation to their football stadium, having a rebirthing. In 2021, everyone thought Kansas football was horrible. Now they're actually pretty good. They're like an 8 or a 9 win team. They also list Duke. That's an obvious one. So we will see when it comes to what the Big Ten wants to do. Obviously, in a perfect scenario, they take North Carolina and maybe FSU, because obviously in a perfect scenario, they're going to want to take Notre Dame and probably FSU, because you're getting into Florida and you're also getting the last big boy still technically available, if you want to say Notre Dame's available, and you would just have complete reign if you added FSU and Notre Dame. My goodness. Let's take a look at this. Group of 5 teams most likely to join a conference. So when they talk about this, I would imagine it would be San Diego State going to the ACC. And the reason that would happen, they list San Diego State first. I would put Memphis ahead of UNLV, mainly based around UNLV's stadium situation. Also, South Florida's getting a new stadium. Boise State, unfortunately, has a very small TV market, so that's their problem. They've got a great fan base, though. But the reason San Diego State would go to the ACC is because the ACC right now is very unbalanced. It's the same problem the Big Ten had when they added 2 Pac-12 teams, and then they had to go back and add 2 more to create a West Wing. The ACC would be creating their own West Wing. Let's say they lose 4 teams. Let's just say, for the sake of this argument, FSU, Clemson, North Carolina, Miami are all gone. They would probably turn to San Diego State, Memphis, maybe another team out west. I don't know if it would be Boise State or UNLV, but probably 2 teams out west at least, and then also a team like Memphis and possibly South Florida with their new stadium they're getting by, I believe, 2028. That's how that would happen. Now, there's also the idea, and this has been rumored for a while. I don't think the rumors are very hot at this point, but there was an idea, San Diego State to the Big 12. I don't think the Big 12 is really interested. I'm guessing the Big 12 is going to sit on the sidelines during this whole thing. They might look to a team like Syracuse for their basketball. There's always also been the rumor they're going to add Gonzaga in basketball as well, but some of these lower tier ACC teams are just not attractive enough unless the conference gets completely destroyed, and they could add a great power in terms of academics like a Virginia. That would be interesting if you could add North Carolina. I don't think North Carolina is going to the Big 12, but we will see. And then taking a look at the attractiveness rating. When you combined everything, your overall team success, you combine the fan base, you combine the ratings, Ohio State and Michigan, both Big Ten teams, most attractive teams right now when it comes to college football conference realignment. Those are your 2 biggest dogs. Alabama, an SEC team at number 3. USC, now part of the Big Ten. Texas, now part of the SEC. Notre Dame, the independent. Georgia, SEC. Penn State, Big Ten. Florida, SEC. UCLA, Big Ten. Oklahoma, SEC. LSU, SEC. A&M, SEC. Wisconsin, Big Ten. How is Wisconsin? Wow. I'm surprised Wisconsin is 14th. I mean, they do, have a nice football program. They've got a great fan base. I would think they'd be a little bit lower. I mean, there's Stanford at number 15. So judging by this attractiveness score, that was a major coup by the ACC to add Stanford and also Cal. Cal is pretty high on this list. I think they're top 25. Yeah, they're number 22. So those teams are really highly thought of. It's just, Stanford and Cal, not the best football teams right now. They're both kind of dumpster fires. You also do have Washington, a Big Ten team, at number 16. Michigan State, Big Ten. Tennessee, I would have figured, would be slightly higher than that. That surprises me. They're down at number 18. FSU, I would have figured, would be around number 13 or 14. Clemson, I would have figured would be higher, especially higher than Stanford. Iowa at 21, Cal at 22, Nebraska at 23, North Carolina also tied with Nebraska as well in terms of attractiveness. But when it comes to the Big Ten, the biggest question, will they be able to pry FSU and Clemson? Do they want FSU and Clemson? Do they even want to add anyone that could potentially dilute their conference? You've also got the idea, maybe they want to get into the SEC country, go to Atlanta, you would take Georgia Tech. I don't think that's happening. I think these conferences are going to get to the point where they're too big, and a full realignment just in general in college football is going to have to happen probably in the late 2020s. But it's all about the money, and we'll see what the Big Ten ends up doing this summer in comparison to the SEC, and will the ACC actually remain together in some form? Those are all questions that will have to be answered. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.